Okay, recording is going, and yeah, I guess we're okay now.
Ready to start? No one waiting?
No, I don't see anyone. No, we're okay.
Okay. All right, great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is a very special talk, and I will introduce our speaker in just a moment. This is another one, I believe this is our 7th Expert 2020 series talk, where we pull together the wonderful advising board we have of founding board members, and we really delve into each person's particular expertise and niche and area of focus, and we try to bring that to our public. These events have they just keep growing and growing. Every time we do one, we get record-breaking registration for it, so we're very excited for this special one. I would like to say, happy summer. I know these are kind of crazy times for everyone in the world, and Gabriella and myself as well have felt this at ILCA, but in spite of everything that's happening, we have continued to be able to offer professional development support for our ILCA members and people that are joining us for training courses. And we have even been able to develop new courses. We are launching our business language coaching course that we're calling the Elevate course in October 2020. The details for registration are now on the website. We're running another language coaching foundation, our star baby, and the expansion course, which is like the second step for foundation. So if you're interested in one or a combined package of these, any one or two of them, whatever it is, reach out to us, take a look at it. I believe we will be taking a small break in August, but we're still around. You can email us, you can get in contact with us at any time, and then our courses will start back in October and November. We know that September is sometimes a crazy time for parents reintegrating kids into school and schedules restarting kind of for the academic school year. So we like to give that space in September, but we are here strong from the beginning of October with our courses. So. All right, and then Gabriella, if you could move the slide forward, please.
Sure.
Okay.
Come on. Okay. Nope. Okay.
All right, great. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce you guys to Gabriella Kovács. She is my business partner and my friend here at ILCA, and one of the most driven and dedicated people that I've ever had the pleasure to work with. She is absolutely dedicated to spreading the craft of language coaching, to providing a clean and passionate, groundbreaking ideals all at the same time. And I'm very honored to be able to present her today. She is a certified language coach, business communication, soft skills trainer, and here she is. I'm going to hand it over to her now. And thank you, Gabriella, for doing this Expert 2020 series for us today.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I'll start off by saying, can I give the admitting duties over to you, Karen?
Absolutely. Yep, I'm on it. I'll let people in.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Bothering with that then now. Okay, fine. So as you can see, I've done quite a lot of things, and I love working with people. Basically, that's my passion, and particularly supporting language teachers to be even better and be as motivated as me in what they're doing. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, how to make what you're doing even better. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to be looking at here is, first of all, the theory in the background that is connected to the topic that I'll be talking about. And then we'll go on to the more practical side, which is the coaching tools, okay? Now, what I'd like to start with is what's behind all this for me. So why I thought up this topic, why I put together this talk today, okay? So first of all, what prompted this talk was something that I read in a Facebook group And I took a little piece of it, and I'm going to show you that. Could you please mute yourself? Sorry. And hello, could you please mute yourself?
Gabriella, I'll mute anybody who's making noise. Okay, don't worry, I'll be on it. I'm on it.
Okay, so what we're going to see is this wonderful little post, and I've got two expressions that I highlighted in it. And what I wanted to show you before we actually got into it was the kind of reaction that it got. So it was 258 comments in 22 hours of posting, which even on Facebook, I would say is a very, very high number. It means that there's immense engagement in this topic. And I'm just going to show you, I think it's something that all of us have gone through at some time in our own career, okay? So here it is. What you can see here is a student that gives the teacher nightmares before every lesson. It's an adult, okay, a business owner, and he doesn't want a book or materials, so just talking, okay? It might be familiar for you. You might have gone through this kind of thing. He might even say, I'm not interested in what we're doing now, let's do something completely different. And it drives the teacher crazy because he or she is putting in all that preparation beforehand, right? And what happens is that he or she feels that it's a waste of time. And he or she is turning to the community of teachers for ideas. Now, I don't know whether this is familiar to you or not, but it's not the first time I've read this kind of description of lessons that you have with students, that they're not really sure what they want, but what you're providing them is not really what they're looking for. And you kind of get into this, what I would say, a lose-lose situation, because everyone is kind of unhappy with what is happening. And it got me thinking of, well, what's in the background of this? What is going on? Let's try to go into a little bit of analysis with this, okay? First thing that came to my mind is, how supported does the teacher feel in this situation? And what or who could give support to this teacher in this situation? But also, equally importantly, on the other hand, what is also important is how supported the student feels in this situation. What is going through the learner's head? What does he or she feel? What does he feel in this situation? Okay. And moving on, what I came up with was two interpretations, one from the point of view of the teacher and one from the point of view of the learner, okay? So I'm going to talk you through how I see this situation, and then we'll probably have some comments in the chat box, but I'd like to talk you through this. First of all, what do we see here? From the teacher's point of view, we see very, very high stress and frustration because they're obviously not happy with going on. There's a lot of tension there. Question about motivation to change. Does this teacher want to change what's going on? I put a question mark there because obviously yes, but he or she is not really sure how that could happen. Is the teacher's engagement high? Obviously, yes. I mean, he or she has put in a comment into a Facebook group, so obviously it's something that's going on. He or she is looking for ideas. So yes, the engagement from the teacher's point of view is very high. We also have opportunities, which at this point, because of the nature of the question, I would say the opportunities are quite few, or at least the options that the teacher sees are not particularly something that they would really like to choose. So obviously they don't want to quit the lessons with the student, but they're kind of stuck with how to move on. So the opportunities are very few at this point. Competency in terms of as a teacher, this teacher is probably very competent, has the lesson plans and comes up with new ideas and new methods or techniques, new kinds of, I don't know, materials that they bring into the lesson. So obviously there's a very high competency for this teacher. What kind of approach do they have? A very strong approach, a very strong teacherly approach, I would say, coming from the angle of bringing in so many things and using a lot of time to prepare and then go into the class and be disappointed once again on both sides. So at this point, I would say this is a lose-lose situation. Now let's have a look at it from the learner's point of view. What we see here, once again, the same categories, but there are more question marks here because of course we only see one side of the story. We don't really see the other side. The stress and frustration is equally high. So that's something which both of them have in common. The motivation to change, it's a question mark because we don't really know what's in the background for the student. What are they willing to change? How motivated are they to change something in their approach, in their willingness to be learning in a different way, perhaps. Their engagement, I would say they probably have the student has a high engagement. But then I didn't put high in there because I wasn't quite sure. High because they haven't quit. They go to every single lesson hoping that perhaps something will be different, but then they get frustrated again because it's not really what they're looking for. So the fact that the student is going on and going to class means that they're quite committed, they're quite engaged, but perhaps in a way which is not working for the teacher, or they cannot collaborate in this sense. Opportunities, I would say, once again here, few. They don't really see, neither of them, neither the teacher nor the student see how they could be working in a different way. So at this point, the opportunities they have are very few. Competency here, we don't know as a student whether they are a competent learner, whether they are aware of how they could be learning, what exactly they should be learning, how they could be reaching their goals. So there's a question mark there, and also what their approach is to their learning, to the learning environment, to the classroom, to the teacher, to maybe the workplace environment that this is taking place in. We're not really clear about that. So a lot of question marks here. And what I'd like to talk you through is how a coaching approach can change this kind of lose-lose into a win-win. But before we get there, we're going to go through a few slides, so bear with me. And we'll see what we actually have here to interpret this situation, sorry about that, to interpret this, okay? So there are a lot of uncertainties here. And what happens here is that I chose this quote on learner autonomy because I think it really, really explains what is going on and what is needed for teachers, for students alike, okay? So I'm just going to read it out very briefly. The challenge facing course designers who wish to foster learners' ability to take charge of their learning is to find ways of supporting the transfer of responsibility for decision-making about learning from teacher to learner. And that's a completely different mindset compared to what we've been trained to do, or at least many of us were trained to do at university or college, which was that we were to impart knowledge and to explain and to describe certain elements of the language, and so the learner will understand and then start using it. Of course, language learning as such has moved a very long way since then, and we've now started to use completely different ideas of how language learning should work. But moving on to what we have here, how how we imagine what we should be supporting really for our learners. We're talking about adults here, okay? And the question is, if we look at these skills, the 2022 skills from the World Economic Forum, the skills that we see here are not necessarily part of what we are supporting in our classes. And in my view, there's a huge big gap there, and we should be focusing, it doesn't really matter whether it's language or not, but we should be incorporating at least some of these skills so that we can at least ask questions or involve our learners in conversations so that they can be better equipped to acquire these skills. And language and communication lessons are a great opportunity to be able to involve a number of these skills. The question I'd like to ask you is whether we as educators, as language educators, are still spoon feeding our learners. So are we still tending to support them in a way which is actually not the support that they need? If we think of that teacher in that Facebook group, frantically asking for some help because they feel stuck in what they're doing. If we look at these skills, analytical thinking, active learning, learning strategies, creativity, obviously technology design and programming is not part of it, critical thinking, analysis, problem solving, etc. These somehow can be incorporated into what we're doing. And the question really is, how can we do that? And that's what we're going to be working on today. Okay. Now, I don't know, Carrie is probably looking at the questions. If there are any questions, I'll be very happy to, answer at the end. Carrie?
No, there's no questions. There's people
Okay,
making
fine.
comments here and there, but no questions.
Okay. Yeah, can you let Boileau in? Okay. So the question really is here, what are we supporting? What can we be supporting? Let's have a look at this from another point of view, okay? So what I'd like you to be looking at is the top 5 soft skills that LinkedIn Learning this year has announced as the top 5, okay? So these are the ones that are sought after most in companies. So if we're looking at adults, then this is what they should be really, really working on. And more and more often now, I'm hearing that soft skills are not really soft skills. Hard skills, soft skills, they're not necessarily the best labels to be using. Soft skills are much more foundational skills now, which are complementing the hard skills that you need. So the core skills, and these I would say are complementing them. So creativity, persuasion, collaboration, adaptability, emotional intelligence, these are all skills that we would say are indispensable nowadays in the workplace, and let's admit it, for us as teachers also. So it's a very good idea not only to be focusing on supporting the skills development of your learners, but also for yourself. So it could be a process going there and back. So you focusing on yourselves and developing your soft skills or foundational skills, but also be supporting your learners because you become more aware of what's going on for you, and that way you can also be more supportive for your learners. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that it's not enough just to be focusing on the language. There has to be a much wider scale of skills of the whole learning environment that we should be taking into account and bringing into the classroom. Now, the question once again is how we bring these into the classroom. So we've had a very, very wide perspective, a big look at what's actually going on here for for our learners, because this is what's expected of them in the class, in the workplace. So the question is, can we be supporting these for them through language, through communication, through the work that we're doing with them? Okay. Now, some more statistics. I'm sorry, I said that at the beginning there would be some more theory and more of the background to this whole thing, and then we'll be moving on to the practical aspect. Very interesting information here, okay? So we all know about generation X, Y, Z, the millennials and all that. They crave self-directed learning experiences or opportunities to craft their own learning goals and choose the learning content that helps achieve them. Another study says that 95% of workers like to learn at their own pace. 58% learn at the point where they need it most. And 76% learn online because they want to do their job faster and better. Which is great, because quite a lot of us have the opportunity now to learn and to teach online, thanks to the situation at present. So what does this say? I like you just, it has been interactive so far. I'm going to stop for a minute here, and I'm going to ask you to write down into the chat box how you feel about this kind of information that I've put in here. Okay, so if anyone would like to just put something in the chat box, and I'll be able to have a look at it. Okay, so do you agree with these? What do these mean? What's the message that's going on here? So if you can type really fast, then we can stop for a minute and have a look. Okay, I'm not seeing anything pop up here. Okay, let's have a look here. Okay, so learning never stops. Delivery and direction becomes critical. Thank you, Kathy. Okay. Anything else here? Learning experience. I think indeed everything now needs to be an experience, to be engaging. Okay. It depends a lot of your teaching style, if you are student-centered or curriculum-centered. Exactly. The big question is now how far we can be stretching that curriculum-centered approach. And I'm not saying it's bad. Obviously, it gets results and it can be very, very effective. The question is how engaging it is for the learners. So more and more we're working around the engagement of the learner more than how effective the curriculum is, because the two have to somehow connect. The question is, how is that possible? What else do we have here? There needs to be considerations of the pacing, how fast one can go with certain constructs. Stuff does not happen overnight, absolutely, okay. Students want involvement in activities, absolutely. Involvement, engagement, yeah, these are these critical expressions that are being used more and more. It depends on the teaching method, absolutely, okay. Learning at their own pace is interesting. Maybe we shouldn't be pushing them along according to a curriculum, to preset objectives, but working with the student and taking into account their styles and centering the teacher more on the student's needs. I like that very much, okay. We need to meet the learners where they are. Putting it very, very nicely, it's simple. Very good, thank you, Mike. Okay, Eric, if you're working for a university or school, this kind of idea is less feasible. I would disagree with that, but okay, I understand your point, absolutely. So obviously, if you've got an external body pushing some kind of curriculum onto you, you have to be following that. But there's still a lot of opportunity for freedom, because within the class, there is quite a lot of freedom, and we're going to be looking at what those areas are that can be actually considered, okay? So just moving on. So this is just a point I wanted to make here, okay? What we have is this term called flexible learning from Laura Overton in a Training Zone Open University paper that I found the other day, and I said, oh, I've got to use something from this, and I really, really like this, and it uses the E word. I love this word. So taking control of our learning builds confidence and empowers individuals. A truly learner-centered approach, therefore, involves handing over control of where, when, and how the individual attains knowledge, practices, reflects, and builds skills. Harnessed appropriately, flexible learning helps us to equip the self-motivated learner by enabling them to take ownership. We empower flexibility in the workplace by helping individuals to help themselves. And the E word that I really love, can you just throw it in the chat box very quickly? What's the E word that you think I really, really love? What could that E word, the word starting with E? Enabling? No, empower. Yes, empower, empower. Enabling also. So yeah, I like that too. Empower, okay. And that kind of empowerment is such a very, very strong force in coaching, and I think in teaching more and more so. As you know, whenever I describe how I imagine coaching, it's not like coaching is here, teaching is there. We're all slipping and sliding on this scale, okay? So sometimes we're a bit more coaching, sometimes we're a bit more teaching, but we're always moving around very flexibly. And for me, enabling and to be able to empower the learner is one of the critical things that coaching can help us do, okay? So what are the implications of these findings? So we've got through all this theory, and there are a lot of ideas going on in your mind, I bet, of, okay, so she said a lot of stuff here. What is she driving at, okay? Let's have a look, okay, so what the implications are, okay? So first of all, the key implications for empowering the learners is, and I'm going to go from left to right, so I'm starting with the dark brown, okay? So there's a bit of color coding here, okay? So first of all, what is crucial is that they take control of when, where, and how the learning takes place as much as possible. Now, this does not mean that if you're at a university, the student will then say, well, I don't want to study language at the university. Actually, I want to study in a zoo or on an airplane, or I want to travel to South America to learn Spanish or Portuguese. That's not really what I mean. But there is a certain element of control in the study that you have at home or when you're traveling, etc. And also the way that you approach your learning in the classroom. So there are a lot of possibilities there. The other thing that we have here is enabling independent decision making to enhance learner control at a higher level. Encouraging a learning culture. Now, encouraging a learning culture is something really, really hype in workplaces now, and how the learning and development departments do that is a big, big question, because it's quite difficult to encourage learning, and it's even more difficult to measure the learning that has taken place. And we're not just talking about languages, but a number of other skills, and not just soft skills, hard skills also. So what we want is for the learner to be able to make decisions so that they can take control of their own learning. And what I usually say is, if you take, as a teacher, in your capacity as an educator, you take a step back, your learner will be able to take a step forward. Because if we're constantly in that space, and I think we're all seasoned educators here, you know exactly what I'm talking about, not the physical space. But if we're constantly in the limelight, then we're not actually giving the stage over to our learners. And I'm not talking necessarily about teacher talking time and how much, you know, how much of the activity the learners actually do. But I'm thinking much more of a more abstract way of thinking of this. How much of the decision making are we handing over to our learners? So if we step back a little bit, they're going to have the opportunity to step forward and get a bit more of control of what they're doing in the classroom and outside the classroom too. Another thing which is important, I'm going to the yellow here, okay, is saving time and energy for both parties through a transfer in the responsibilities and also having ownership issues. So if your learner is taking responsibility, taking ownership of the learning that they have, then what is going to happen is they're going to be more empowered because they have taken control, right, of what they're actually doing. If we do not give them the responsibility, or we do not push that responsibility onto them, then in a way we are failing them, because we're trying to spoon feed them. We're trying to do everything instead of them, like the good parent, you know, and that's not necessarily going to be a good strategy long term. Short term maybe, but long term not. Finally, here we have a noticeable paradigm shift regarding the expectations. These will result in new role descriptions, both for the learner and for the teacher, and more tailored learning outcomes. So the moment that the learner is able to identify much more with the learning that they want to engage in, because they've made decisions, they're taking control of their learning journey, then in that moment, a new kind of outcome will be born for them, because they will be able to be very clear about what they want. So they will be able to define where they want to get with their learning. And that's going to create true engagement. Without that, if they are not feeling, if they don't feel that they're responsible for their own learning, they're not going to be connecting at a deeper level. They're not going to be motivated. They're not going to be engaged with what they're actually doing. And these are all very consistent with how coaching thinks about what the client should be working towards in the coaching process. Okay. So what happens when you apply a coaching mindset? Well, first of all, you might, obviously this is a very general thing, but I've seen it a lot of times with teachers who first learn about coaching, and they say, well, no way, I can't do this. I can't do this with my students. It won't work. Because it's so different to teaching, and my students have never done anything like this, and I can't expect them to be working in this completely different way with me, and I can't expect it of myself. And so there are a lot of issues going on, and then you start kind of bargaining with, okay, maybe I could try this, but I don't think that would work. And so you start reasoning with yourself of how you could kind of implement a coaching approach in your classes, and then you feel that it's not going to work at all, and you get into a kind of a state of depression, and then after a while you kind of accept that it is possible and it can work, and then you get to a breakthrough, and then you're going to get to a completely different level of learning and teaching. And very briefly, a story here. I've recently completed a coaching training myself, and after the first few lessons, I realized this is not quite what I was expecting. It's not going to. I went through exactly this same curve, and now, of course, I think I'm a much better coach than I was before the course. But when I started out, I went through this shock and denial. I was very angry for, wasting my time. Why did I get into this? I was happy earlier. Why am I doing this? But then, of course, you go through this curve, and you recognize the stages, and you understand that in order to change hurts, okay? That's what happens. So very often teachers, when they experience coaching for the first time, they think, well, this is not for me. I can't do this. I'm not going to do this, and my students will definitely not be able to do anything with this. Of course, there are other examples when somebody after the first coaching session says, yes, this is what I want to do. You decide. But if you're very new to coaching, you might experience some kind of surprise and being a little bit at loss of how to bring this into the classroom. So just be armed and be careful. How will coaching make you do certain things? Well, let's have a look here. First of all, we'll start with reassessing down at the bottom. You're going to need to reassess your needs, your learner's needs, your expectations. Your learner will probably reassess their own expectations, the goals, what procedure you're going to be working across, and what resources you're going to be learning. So basically the fundamentals of any kind of learning process will be reassessed, simply because you're going to be looking at the learning, at the teaching process with different lens. Moving on next to support, you're going to see that your skills and mindset will have to be supporting your learner's skills and mindset. And it's not just about information and knowledge. We as educators are there to be supporting, to be helping the learners to acquire a new kind of thinking, something which is much more open and much more they need to learn, for example, to collaborate with others, how teamwork works, especially with adults. It's something which is really going to help them, and communicating in a foreign language, plus working with, you know, teamwork and how to be actually supportive of each other instead of being competitive. I disagree, for example, with getting my students or my clients to write tests in class and, you know, checking who's the best, that kind of thing. I totally disagree with that. That's completely opposite of the coaching kind of mindset that I try to instill on them. Recognize and acknowledge the learning that has taken place. That's also a very important part of the support that you are providing. If someone making even just a baby step, a very small step, that means that they are learning, that they are making progress, and sooner or later they're going to get there. Nobody jumps to the top of the mountain, right, with one leap. It always takes a succession of steps to get there, and we have to acknowledge that. This does not mean that we have to throw a party after every single new word that has been acquired. That's not what I mean, but it's definitely much more motivating if somebody sees that the teacher recognizes that they're making an effort, that they're trying to put themselves into it, despite the fact that they don't have time, they have family, they have other commitments. Putting that little bit there, smiling and saying, that was great, you know, it wasn't perfect, but I think that you're on the right track, that can really, really boost their self-confidence. What else can you do? You can use activities that will enhance the critical thinking, collaboration, to support learner autonomy, and definitely have some kind of interface for effective collaboration. So once again, working together is going to be much more prized in classes also, rather than this traditional just individually and, you know, saying, okay, Tommy, what's the correct answer? That's not really what we're working towards, and I bet everyone who is here is not that kind of teacher. What else do we have? Reflecting. Reflection is often overlooked. I would say even in coaching occasionally, it's one of the most powerful tools that you can have. Reflect, for example, at the end of an activity. How was it? Did you like it? What was the most important thing you learned in this activity? And then you can, you know, broaden this and say, at the end of the course, at the end of the week, what is it you're taking away? What would you do differently? Is there anything that you would like to change in what we're working on? How could you benefit from it more next time? That kind of thing. So there are a lot of questions that you can ask there, and you can increase the awareness of your learners And increasing awareness means that next time they're going to be able to make a more informed decision, which will increase their control, and it's going to empower them. Zooming out, be very careful that you actually move out of what you're actually doing and look at a variety of sources and try to see where you could get some new ideas from. I'm not saying that you should be looking through a gardening manual, because that might not be the best thing that could help you. But if you're supporting language learners in a workplace environment, you could be looking at the industry that they are in and taking best practices from that environment and building that somehow into a project that you're working on, or taking a tool or some kind of activity that they themselves use on a daily basis in their workplace, and you could be working on their language with that kind of activity. So there could be a lot of ideas there. Okay, moving on now. I've put together this 4-step strategy pyramid, which I thought could be useful just to think through, so what is going on here? And what is really important, first of all, is for the teacher and also for the learner to feel okay, to be balanced emotionally, to have the mental health, the well-being, to be able to support. Without that, the learner will not be able to feel supported, okay? Something very important I read months or years ago, I don't know, is to work towards the milestones and not towards the 100%. If we're always comparing ourselves, and if our learners are always comparing themselves to the 100% mark, then they're constantly going to feel that they're failing, that they're not there yet. But if you've got smaller milestones, once again, celebrating those smaller milestones and feeling at ease with not being perfect is one of the best places to start from. What else is important? To review the needs, to pay attention to the caring and sharing. Asking how someone is, how are you, John, is much more important in certain cases, particularly in 2020 and probably in 2021, than increasing stress by saying that you have to push harder because what you're producing at the moment is not good enough. Okay, because we don't know everyone's story. We don't know what's in the background. Jointly collaborating and letting full of the teacher control, that's going to be one of the critical things that I think teachers in the 21st century really have to start rethinking. Getting to terms with the spheres of responsibility, we're going to get there in a minute. And the last thing is to constantly have that self-development, not only professionally, but personally also. So being aware of your what's going on for you emotionally, in terms of how you're achieving your goals, how your for example, how's your time management as a person, so that you could be giving tips to your students, okay? If you have a vision of why you are doing something, why you're doing that teaching, why you want to support that student, then that's going to shine through definitely. Now, this spheres of responsibility is something I put together for today again, to help you understand how you could actually implement it. And we'll soon come to the 4 tools, okay? I'm going to be giving you 4 coaching tools. So before everyone falls asleep, the teacher responsibility sphere could be these things. So working with a professional framework, providing experience-based guidance, working on internal motivation of the learner, setting the tone. How you notice the language, the instructional language that you are using in class. Are you much more giving instruction? Are you willing to ask more questions, more open questions, to create a true conversation with your learners? Or are you trying to keep things very much on a tight track because you've got the curriculum, because you've got the set goals, because there are a number of things that you have to get through in the class? Or are you willing to explore and open up a little bit and see what happens, what I call the coaching magic happens when you let go a little bit, and then suddenly, once again, the learner will come into that space and own their own learning. You can also be in control as a teacher of the depth of reflection and awareness that you bring into the classroom concerning the learning that is happening or the teaching that you're doing. And you're absolutely responsible for creating trust, security, and encouraging learners to believe in themselves. This is what you are responsible for. Now, moving on, let's have a look at what the learner can be responsible for. They can be responsible for identifying the milestones, okay, so that they see what steps they might take to reach their goals in the long term. They can also be responsible for building the collaborations, to be working together, to be sharing. I've seen this happen over and over again. Give you a very brief example. I was working with four financial managers in a department, but they didn't really know each other. And through working with me, I was coaching them on financial language, economic language, and they said that they came to know each other, to trust each other, and they created a very good collaboration with each other, and they want to continue that. Even though we have finished the course, they're going to remain in correspondence with each other, because we built a very strong collaborative environment in which they learn to accept the advice, the help, the suggestions, and the comments of each other. That's very, very important. That can be very empowering also. The learner also needs to understand what their optimal learner self is like. If they're not aware of that, then they cannot actually attain that kind of optimal learning self. Excuse me. What might be worth a try? Now, this is where there's a bit of play, okay? So you can either push it towards the learner, or you can keep that in your own responsibility sphere. Creating content elements, so the what, okay? The meaty chunks of content that you put into the courses, okay? This can go either towards the learner or towards the teacher. You can play around with that content. Once again, if you have a very, very rigid course outline that you have to be following, break it down. It might be that you are given topics, but certain elements of the content can be broken down, and they can be given to the learners to work on, okay? So you don't have to do the majority of the work. You can be very explorative and be giving it to the learners. You can also ask someone to assemble certain elements here, or you could be finding ways to reach goals and how to carry out tasks. So not only the what, but the how can be the learner's responsibility if you want, or it can be the teacher's responsibility. Once again, it's up to you how you would like that to be going and how much of a so-called risk you're willing to take. Once again, the quantity and the frequency of the activities, which means how often and how much of certain activities the learners would prefer or would not prefer, what they would like instead. So once again, working with the content can be something where the learner could be more taken into account, I mean, the decisions that they want to take. Okay, moving on, language coaching tools, here we are, okay. What's a language coaching tool? Well, it's not something that teaches the language. It can be used anytime. Let's have a look at the functions of coaching tools, and then we're going to I'm going to present 4 coaching tools that you can take away and you can use with your learners, okay? Functionally, what do? They encourage partnership. I'm going to very brief here. They bridge communication gaps. They support critical thinking and active learning, also active listening. They balance the ownership and the responsibilities. I've talked quite a lot about this. And they help the reflection and the awareness raising. That's something I can't say enough. If you are aware, then you know what you need and you know what goals you have to set, and you will also know how to reach them. If you can create well-being, then that can be swell-being. And I think language coaching tools can do these in the language classroom. And let's have a look at what I mean by these, okay? So tool number one, before we go into this, are there any questions? I don't know, I haven't been looking anywhere here, but Carrie, is there anything here that I need to know about?
No, we're good. It's commenting.
Okay. And hopefully nobody's fallen asleep. We can't hear them anyway. All right, okay. So tool number one is 3 reflective questions that you can ask, and I'm just going to pop these up here, okay? So number one is, this is something you can ask yourself as a teacher, okay? How directive have I been today with my instructional language? At the end of the day, just reflect through this. Think about, was I very instructional today? Was I kind of telling people what to do instead of getting into a conversation with them, asking some questions, starting a sentence, letting the learners finish it? So how did I open up that space between us? The second question that you can ask is, where was the spheres of responsibility centered in class today? So was the responsibility all in my hands? Was I totally in control? Did I partially give it over to the learner, or was it fully led by the learner? That's also something that you can, even on a scale of 1 to 10, you can kind of assess yourself. Number 1, totally with the teacher. Number 10, totally with the learners. Okay. So something just to think about. And the third one is, what is the one thing I will try out or do differently tomorrow? How am I going to open up what I've been doing and how I'm going to be moving forward? Okay. So this is something that you can take away with you and just simply ask yourself at the end of the day, or at the end of a particularly challenging question, challenging lesson. Excuse me. Okay. Second tool. This is something I've used with some of my learners, and it's great individually, also with groups of learners.
Sorry, Gabriella, was that a pause for questions? Because we did have one just come through.
Oh, there was a question. Okay, let's hear the question then.
It's language learning in place of having multiple language. So yeah, if you've got a multilingual environment, that it can be difficult. And the question was about teaching or supporting learning in that environment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what's the question specifically?
How can we teach in such places? And that's from Raju. And Raju, I'm assuming that you mean it like in a local context where there's competing languages, maybe like 3 languages that are spoken widely. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Well, you'd be using the target language. Once again, coaching at this level, I would say you might need to be at least B1, or if you ask coaching questions, you would be asking them in the mother tongue, or the tongue which everybody understands in the class. Okay, I don't know whether that answers the question. So I've worked with people who might not have a very strong command of English, but we had the coaching conversation in Hungarian, which is my mother tongue, my other mother tongue. And so we had the coaching stuff going in the language where the learner felt more competent. And then we switched into the target language and we went on with the learning. Okay, does this answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
All right, okay. So what we have here is, I usually use different kind of post-its or piece of paper. Obviously, we'd be using whiteboard in Zoom. And you have a number of words that could somehow bring in new ideas for your learners concerning their learning. Okay, so we're building awareness here. I don't want them to learn these words. It's not about, do you know what praise means? What is feedback in German or French or whatever? That's not the point here. The point is here, we want to have a conversation about what these mean to the group, or what these words mean to the learner in their language learning process. And they can then put these arrows and see how they are connected. So goals can be connected to feedback. Feedback connected to praise. Feedback is also important for teams. Teams support each other. You can start here with knowledge and skills are an important aspect. They will give you a lot of energy. Also, they can cause frustration. If you have the knowledge and skills, that will bring on success, which will in turn move you towards your goals. So there are a lot of ways that you can put these arrows, and of course you could rearrange these in a different way. An activity that you can give then to your learners is write up a few words connected to learning, or even better, get them to write down words connected to learning that they associate with learning in general, not necessarily language learning, but learning in general. And then they have to do some sort of mind map, or just arrange them in some kind of logical form, and then they would have to describe what these words mean, how they are connected. And it can be a very, very, very fruitful conversation. I've done it with IT managers, I've done it with financial managers, I've worked with secondary school students working with these. So there are a lot of, and each single occasion will be completely different. And the main idea is that they come to terms with what learning means for them. And they learn a little bit about what their approach to learning is. Okay, so moving on, because I know that we're a little bit pressed for time. Feedback to make progress. How you can get an objective view of yourself. You can do this as a teacher. If you want someone to observe you, you can have these questions, but you can also ask your learners. These are adults in a workplace, and I always ask them to go into that workplace with the learner mind on, or with the language user mind hat on, sorry, and ask these questions from their colleagues. For example, have you noticed any areas I've made improvement in? That's an easy one. What would you say went best today for me? Okay, let's say there was a meeting and Hans is asking you again whether his English was good in the meeting today. What went best today? What do you think? So you can be very open about learning, and I think it's a very good thing that colleagues learn that the other person would really like to improve. On a scale of 1 to 5, how did I do today? That's a short question. It gives some information about what's going on. Can you give me 2 specific areas I could improve in? And if they're very uncertain, they could just focus on the first 2 questions, because they're going to bring positive feedback in. The top 2, the scale of 1 to 5, and can you give me 2 areas, those will be more critical. They will give more critical feedback, okay? And it's a wonderful thing that they will open up about their language learning to a colleague, and the colleague is going to appreciate it and acknowledge it and going to give them some very good feedback. So it's a great way to involve the workplace community for the language learner. And I've seen it happen, and it's great. Okay. And the last one is, you may have seen this on social media. It's a compass. I'm sorry, that purse should not be there at all. Okay. So it's a development compass, which helps the learner to identify their needs, what makes them excited, okay, what gives them the passion. Also, what worries them in terms of their connected to their language learning, and what steps do they need to make to move forward with their learning. So you can play a game and you can assign some learners, if you're working with a group, what needs do they have? What language learning needs do they have? Another group could be working on what makes them excited when they're learning the language, when they're engaging in the language. Another group could be focusing on what is it that worries them, what's a challenge that they are facing, okay? And there could be a group who's focusing on steps. What steps do they need to take to move forward with their goals? If you're working with an individual, I went through this and I spent about 2 times 80 minutes with this. So you can have a very, very extended conversation, coaching conversation with this. And you ask questions to get them to come up with 2 or 3 ideas for each of them. The question is, does coaching need to have double the recognition? What do you think about how coaching can be implemented, how it can be applied to the teaching that you're doing? Can they work side by side? And I'd like to open it up now. And if there are any questions, then I'd be very, very happy to answer. And basically, this is all for me. So I'm opening up for Q&A. If anyone can stay a few minutes, I'd be very happy to answer questions, okay? So thank you very much. Okay, are there any questions?
There's some coming through in the chat box. One came into me, you can look at them. One just came into me privately. Is this feedback as a peer-to-peer feedback? As colleagues, they observe each other, and so one colleague, classmate can help each other and give feedback during the language lesson.
Absolutely, very good. So you could actually be they could be observing each other as they're going on in the class. Very good idea. Thank you.
Okay. And then there's one that came in before. Are you talking of mother tongue based multilingual education? What strategies could one use in order to motivate learners in learning English skills and aspects, English language skills and aspects?
Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, so you've got a target language of English, and you've got, once again, multiple languages spoken in the classroom otherwise. Would that be it? I'm going to have a look here. I'm not quite sure.
That was the first question that came in from Mahesh Singh Saud.
Okay, so are you talking of mother tongue based multilingual education? I would, but I don't think, okay, what strategies should one use in order to motivate learners in learning English skills and aspects, English language skills and aspects? Well, that's what I've been talking about. So I would say that if you're working with a mother tongue based multilingual education, that's where coaching can work best. So there has to be some kind of common basis that you can share something which is not quite clear in the target language. Okay, I think that's what the question refers to. Any other questions here? Thought-provoking, thank you. Okay, any questions? That you're all very, very quiet now. If you want, you can even turn on your microphone. I'm very happy to.
Excuse me, Gabriella?
Yeah, sure.
I'm Anna. I would like to ask a question. I was typing, but maybe it's easier to.
Right, okay, sure. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for your explanation. And my question is, to what extent do you think the term language teacher and language coach encompass the idea behind it, or the rationale behind the work of this professional to the student? Do I make myself clear?
Could you rephrase that?
Yeah. So, okay, I'm a student and I'm looking for someone to help me learn a language. And then I see language teacher, and then I see language coach.
Okay.
Do you think there is a change in the client's behavior into choosing a language teacher and a language coach just because of the term?
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. One thing that I often get, and partly what sparked me to do the work that I'm doing at ILCA, is that there's not enough understanding of what coaching is. So what language coaching is, and what is really important is for the teacher to understand whether their learner needs a coach or not. So if I didn't particularly want to go into that today, but so being aware of when you need a coach and when you need a teacher, that's important to know. So you need a teacher when you're okay, you know what your goal is, and you're totally fine working with a teacher, and you're making progress, and you're going to reach your goal sooner or later. You need a coach if you're totally at loss of what you want to learn, why you want to learn it, how you want to learn it, where you want. I'm sorry, my clock fell down off the wall, which is okay. So time's up basically, yes. So what if the client is completely stuck, demotivated? So I would say that the man in the Facebook group at the beginning of this whole slideshow would need a coach to understand what it is that would motivate him, what it is that could help him to move forward, to establish what goals he actually has. Because the teacher is trying with this teaching hat to bring in all these ideas, and the client is, or the student is just saying, no, this is not what I want something different, but he can't really identify what it is he wants. And the teacher is not necessarily in the capacity to be able to ask the right questions for the learner to identify what they want. So I don't know whether that's clear or not. So the roles are different. So the teacher is there to teach when the learner is okay to learn from a teacher, but a coach is going to help a learner to understand what they need to be able to be better learners. Is that clear? Does that kind of answer your...
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. I think that's a great overview. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Coaching, teaching, yes, this is, yeah, they are not synonyms. Absolutely not. What I would say is that there are a lot of teachers out there, probably many of you here, who have a coaching approach in your teaching, but coaching, it has its own code of ethics. It has its own standards. It's a profession. It's recognized as a profession on its own. And it's not to be mixed with, counseling, mentoring. So these are all different areas of supporting activities, supporting professions, and there are overlaps, but they're not the same. Okay. What else do we have? It's clear. Thank you. Okay. If the learners are finding a real hard time in learning English as a second language, is it acceptable to do translation? Well, as a language coach, I don't know whether that question should be coming towards me. As a teacher, I would say try everything before translating, but if that's the fastest way and it's going to save you time, then yes, but okay. Are all teachers able to become coaches? That's a very good question. I don't know. There are some teachers who simply will not be able to take off the teaching hat. So they will keep the control in their own hands. They're going to be explaining, describing, telling everything, and they're not going to be opening up this space to bring in the learner, even though they're going to be working with communicative approaches, but it's still not the same as having a coaching approach in the teaching that you're doing. So that's a completely different combination of skills that you need and a completely different approach to what you're doing in the classroom. Just an example, it very often happens that I've got about 10, 15 clients a week. And my preparation is I take out a piece of paper and a pen and I ask them, so what are we going to work on today? And that's all the preparation I need, because the client is bringing in the agenda, the client is bringing in what they need, the client is going to start talking about what they want to be getting out of the session that we have. So that's how powerful coaching can be. But of course, if you're combining coaching and teaching, that's different. So that does need some preparation, of course. So there you're going to be combining things. And these are things that you can learn at ILCA, by the way. I'm just saying that. The other thing, can you get the slides? Everyone will get the slides if you want. There's also going to be a recording on our YouTube, so that's going to be available. I don't know if there are any more questions here. Okay. Any other questions, or we're just going to finish here? Carrie, shall we wrap up?
Yep, sure.
Yeah, right. Okay. So thank you very much for everyone.